Something astonishing is unfolding right now, and hardly anyone in America is talking about it. In just a handful of weeks, the U.S. lost its grip on the global food market it spent a century building. Not because of war or natural disaster, but because of quiet backroom deals that shifted billions of dollars in trade. Deals signed by some of America's closest allies with, of all countries, Canada. Why did Japan, France, Germany, the UK, Italy, even Mexico start redirecting shipments that once automatically flowed through American farms? What did Canada promise that Washington failed to deliver? And how could this seismic shift leave entire communities across the Midwest staring at empty silos and frozen bank loans? Stay with us. Let's dive inside and break down exactly how this silent takeover is happening and what it means for the future of American agriculture. Who would have guessed that in just 6 short weeks, the United States would watch a century of agricultural dominance slip through its fingers? Not from war, not from drought, but from a string of missed phone calls and empty conference rooms. Let's unpack this, because what's unfolding isn't merely a hiccup in trade figures. It's a seismic shift in trust, logistics, and geopolitical balance, and the world may never go back to how it was. From global powerhouse to hesitant partner. At the start of 2025, America was still the gold standard for food security. Countries planned their diets around Midwestern corn, Texan beef, and Kansas wheat. U.S. farmers were not just suppliers, they were linchpins in countless national strategies. So what changed? Not hostile tariffs, not catastrophic floods, but silence. Meetings that ended early, negotiations left hanging, follow-ups that never came. And into that vacuum stepped someone the U.S. long overlooked: Canada. Isn't it astonishing that after decades of treating Canada as a junior partner in global food trade, the tables turned almost overnight? Shouldn't Washington have seen it coming? The Canadian playbook, consistency over charisma. Here's what Canada did right, and it's so simple, it almost feels insulting to call it strategy. They showed up. While American officials got bogged down in domestic squabbles, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney quietly built a coalition. In the back rooms of the G7 summit, he met with leaders from Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and the UK. Headlines blared about defense spending and renewable energy targets, but something far more critical was taking shape behind closed doors: the future of who feeds whom. And when the US president departed the summit early without nailing down fresh agricultural deals, Canada pounced. New contracts were drafted in quiet hotels, signed over discreet dinners, and locked in for years. How did such routine diplomatic housekeeping flip the global food map? Could American arrogance, expecting loyalty without renewing it, be to blame? When trust breaks, supply chains rewrite themselves. By June, numbers started doing what headlines hadn't, telling the real story. U.S. agricultural exports to its 5 closest G7 allies, worth over $74 billion just 2 years ago, plummeted. Meanwhile, Canada's food exports to these same nations surged by nearly 20%. In Japan, importers who once swore by Kansas wheat turned to Manitoba. France and Germany inked dairy contracts running through 2026, with Ontario, not Wisconsin. The UK redirected almost half its soybean orders to Alberta. This wasn't merely a political snub, it was survival strategy. These nations needed stable deliveries, not legislative roller coasters, and Canada offered calm, predictable ports. Does this highlight a deeper truth? That in today's world, reliability is more valuable than any diplomatic handshake? Meanwhile, in America, a slow-motion crisis. On the plains of Iowa and Nebraska, farmers watched corn and soybean prices crater to decade lows. Local banks froze lines of credit. Projects to build new cold storage, predicated on steady European demand, ground to a halt. The USDA's June report warned of stockpiles ballooning past 52 million tons, with no easy exit before the next harvest. Picture this: small-town grain silos now subsidized by local governments just to prevent catastrophic spoilage. Meanwhile, bureaucrats in Washington hold committee hearings about temporary subsidies. Too little, too late. Is it any wonder rural communities feel abandoned? Who will bail them out if foreign customers never come back? Canada's rural boom, the noise of success. Drive through rural Saskatchewan or Alberta these days, and you won't see triumphant parades or smug press conferences. You'll just hear noise, new harvesters, trucks loading through the night, barns being expanded. Canada didn't win through cunning. They won by simply not faltering when America did. According to Bloomberg Intelligence, U.S. AG exports fell nearly $6 billion in Q2 2025 compared to the year before. Canada's jumped 13%. That gap isn't abstract. It means new machinery on Canadian farms, rising rural wages, and more clout at trade tables. How did the U.S. fail to read such obvious tea leaves? Did anyone in Washington even notice Canadian delegations making near-weekly stops in Brussels, Tokyo, and London? Mexico, the domino America never expected. If there was any country the U.S. thought immune to this shift, it was Mexico. In 2024, America shipped over $31 billion in farm goods south, more than to any other nation on Earth. First, there were the bureaucratic slowdowns, longer customs checks, extra paperwork, then immigration raids that panicked factory workers and clogged border hubs. Mexico, watching nervously, didn't hold a press conference. They simply picked up the phone. By June 2025, Canada and Mexico signed a $5 billion agricultural agreement covering soybeans, frozen meats, wheat, and dairy. And overnight, Mexican trucks began rolling out of Veracruz loaded with goods bearing maple leaves, not stars and stripes. Is this the starkest evidence yet that even America's closest partners see it as a risky bet? The human fallout, empty silos, and broken dreams. In border states like Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, the effects were immediate. Idle trucks, shuttered grain elevators, processing plants operating at half capacity, banks reappraising farm loans they once treated as bulletproof. Meanwhile, Mexican buyers aren't boycotting American products. They're simply reducing risk. And Canada, with stable export policies and transparent customs rules, offered certainty U.S. trade no longer could. Imagine being a farmer in Iowa today, watching two of your closest neighbors, north and south, do brisk business with each other while your contracts vanish. Would you trust Washington to fix it? Why this is more than economics. It's reputation. Let's not pretend this is just about lost dollars. It's about lost faith. When Rotterdam's port cranes offload containers, they're more likely stacked with goods from Halifax than New Orleans. Tokyo's beef no longer comes from Texas, but Alberta. Italian pasta makers? They're writing checks to Manitoba, not Kansas. It's a reputation erosion. And here's the harshest truth. No amount of tariffs can fix broken trust. Countries might forgive higher costs or occasional weather disruptions. What they won't forgive is chaos. So what does this say about America's standing as a reliable partner? Can new subsidies ever rebuild what steady relationships once guaranteed? As a political analyst, where does this go from here? From my vantage point, as someone who's watched trade alignments for decades, this is more than a blip. It's a structural realignment. 5 G7 partners pivoted first. Mexico followed. If these trends continue, expect Brazil, South Korea, and even Middle Eastern importers to diversify next. They're watching not just market prices, but how Washington treats long-term commitments. Meanwhile, Canada is cementing itself as the quiet guarantor of global food security. Not because they undercut prices, but because they undercut uncertainty. Is the U.S. prepared to overhaul export rules, stabilize domestic debates, and offer the predictability buyers crave? Or will policymakers cling to internal squabbles while the world retools supply lines without them? What do you think? So here's where I want to turn it over to you. Do you believe America can win back its top customers? Was Canada simply more strategic, or did the U.S. sabotage itself through indecision? And what does this shift mean for rural towns across the Midwest that bet their future on endless global demand?